What came attacking were 7 or 8 monsters called flying bone spirits. These monsters were not particularly large, looking like human skeletons, except their lower bodies were not legs but rather a whip-like tailbone. Additionally, their arms had transformed into 2 white bone blades and were extraordinarily sharp. These were level 70 elite monsters with extremely high agility attribute. They were even able to dodge Bao Bao's dragon breath. To kill them, they usually had to rely on Bao Bao's unavoidable heaven's punishment or Xiao Ye's black dragon pressure to hold them in place. Among the more than 10 types of monsters that had appeared in the divine bone forest, the flying bone spirits were not the strongest, but they were definitely among the more challenging ones to deal with. When Lu Fan saw these monsters attacking, his brows furrowed. He was about to have Xiao Ye switch to her World Destroyer form to use Black Dragon pressure to crowd control them. However, Bao Bao did not want any help. He did not even wait for Lu Fan's command and directly attacked. The crimson lightning on Bao Bao's body constantly sparked and blew up, looking far more intimidating than the previous lightning around his body. Bao Bao breathed out a dragon breath, while each of his claws grasped a heaven's punishment lightning bolt, ready to strike at any moment. Roaring thunder burst from Bao Bao's mouth, instantly covering the area. This skill's power was clearly on another level, as once his dragon breath passed through, all the white bones in its path that made up the divine bone forest were disintegrated. The dragon breath enveloped the flying bone spirits. However, these monsters were suddenly surrounded by a golden light, with their speed increasing dramatically. They transformed into streaks of light, avoiding Bao Bao's roaring thunder at a speed that could not be captured by the naked eye. Although Bao Bao had entered his growth period, the opponents were still of a higher level, with far higher agility attribute. Furthermore, all their skills were movement speed buffs, so roaring thunder missing was within Lu Fan's expectations. However, what happened next surprised him. As Bao Bao released roaring thunder, strands began appearing within a kilometer radius around Bao Bao. These strands were everywhere, emitting a faint crimson light, winding like dragons but with sharp angles at every turn. Looking carefully, these were not just strands, but rather thin strands of crimson lightning. Lu Fan understood that this must be the effect of crimson jade, forming a lightning boundary around a certain area after Bao Bao used his skills. Enemies within this lightning boundary would trigger these thin strands when moving, so the further they moved, the more damage they would take. However, how much damage could such thin strands really do? Lu Fan was somewhat disappointed by the lightning effect from Crimson Jade. He convinced himself that it had at least increased Bao Bao's skill power by 50%, which was not too bad. Just as Lu Fan was thinking this, sudden explosions in the distance made him immediately abandon thoughts of maybe Crimson Jade isn't all that special. In the distance, as the lightning boundary formed, 2 flying bone spirits charged in at an extremely fast speed. They instantly triggered countless thin crimson lightning strands. These crimson lightning strands looked as thin as threads, almost invisible. However, once triggered, they exploded like heavenly lightning. Each crimson lightning strand struck by the flying bone spirits would create a small mushroom cloud explosion behind them. With the flying bone spirits moving so fast, they triggered tens of thousands of these crimson strands upon entering the boundary. Instantly, these tens of thousands of crimson lightning strands all exploded with terrifying power. Almost immediately, the flying bone spirits at the front were killed by these strands, turning into experience points. This scene shocked all 4 girls. Even though none of Bao Bao's skills had hit the monsters, they were mysteriously killed after charging in. How strange was that? The girls were not stupid, though. They naturally realized these thin crimson lightning strands were not as simple as they appeared to be. They were like detonators exploding upon contact. Everyone was now in the lightning boundary. Surrounded by crimson lightning, they were afraid to move. This was no joke. After all, if level 70 elite monsters could be instantly killed, what chance would they, Level 30X players have if they triggered the Crimson Lightning Strands. As for the other surviving Flying Bone Spirits, the death of those two taught them a great lesson. The Flying Bone Spirits behind could not break in time and entered the lightning boundary. Although they took several Crimson Lightning Strands, they had not moved deep enough to trigger so many lightning explosions. Thus, they were not instantly destroyed like the previous two. However, this posed another problem for them. Now, these Flying Bone Spirits were suspended in the air, within the lightning boundary, unable to move forward or backward. Even worse, the Crimson Lightning Strands in the lightning boundary was not stationary. Rather, it flowed like liquid. The gaps they had created when entering the boundary had already been filled by other Crimson Lightning Strands. In fact, these Flying Bone Spirits had stepped into an ever-changing minefield. They were caught in a dilemma. They had been troublesome to deal with because of their high agility attribute. But now, they dare not move. However, if they were not moving, were they not just sitting targets, waiting to be slaughtered? Seeing these live targets in his lightning boundary, Bao Bao became more excited and threw out the Heaven's Punishment he had been holding. 2 Heaven's Punishment were launched, directly hitting 2 Flying Bone Spirits. The Flying Bone Spirits were already injured upon entering the lightning boundary, and now being hit by Bao Bao's single target skills, plus Bao Bao's lightning having 50% increase in power from Crimson Jade. These 2 Heaven's Punishment instantly killed 2 Flying Bone Spirits. Moreover, with 2 more skills released, the Crimson Lightning Strands in the boundary clearly multiplied, becoming 3 times as dense as before. This delighted Lu Fan. So, the lightning boundary's strength is not fixed. It will gradually get stronger the more skills Bao Bao releases. This was truly divine. After all, Bao Bao as a Blue Dragon King could cast magic continuously without stopping. With this characteristic, combined with Crimson Jade's effect, does this not make him invincible? In the future, when Bao Bao had more skills, casually releasing dozens of them would turn the lightning boundary into an absolute forbidden zone. Whoever entered would be struck dead by lightning. Even those with high agility attribute and movement speed skills, what could they do? In the lightning boundary, no matter how high their agility attribute was, would they dare to move? Lu Fan really needed to apologize to the Crimson Jade. It was not useless at all. Rather, it was incredibly divine. While Lu Fan was shocked, Bao Bao's suppressive fire did not stop. He continuously threw out Heaven's punishments, while even more terrifyingly breathed out roaring thunder, enveloping the Flying Bone Spirits. How could the Flying Bone Spirits dare to take such intense firepower head-on? They only had skills that increased their agility and movement speed, without any defense skills. Even as level 70 elite monsters, they definitely could not withstand being hit by Bao Bao's skills. The Flying Bone Spirits did not plan to wait for death. They made the quick decision to retreat the moment Bao Bao's skills were released. 2 Flying Bone Spirits targeted by Heaven's Punishment could not dodge and were instantly destroyed. The remaining Flying Bone Spirits tried to escape, but after flying just over 10 meters, they triggered countless Crimson Lightning Strands, continuously bombarded until they could not endure it anymore and fell to the ground. It was only fortunate that at least their charred forms remained intact. These Flying Bone Spirits were truly pitiful. After stepping into Bao Bao's lightning boundary, they could not move or stay still. Moreover, because Bao Bao had released several more skills, the Crimson Lightning Strands became even denser than before. So, even if the Flying Bone Spirits moved just a dozen meters, they could not withstand that many lightning strikes. Bao Bao displayed absolute dominance. Completely controlling the whole area, he became extremely proud, raising his head to continue breathing out roaring thunder, forming a sea of lightning in the sky. Soon, winds rose and clouds gathered, with lightning flashing and thunder roaring. This created an incredibly intimidating scene. Seeing this, Lu Fan could not help but feel envious, thinking, as expected of a dragon most suited for casting dragon language magic, with his limitless mana pool, he can keep casting skills like they are nothing. As Bao Bao continued breathing out roaring thunder, the lightning boundary not only did not dissipate, but it became even denser. Within a kilometer radius, the lightning boundary had already appeared like a layer of crimson mist. Having witnessed the flying bone spirit's miserable deaths, everyone knew that while this crimson mist looked beautiful, it was actually extremely dangerous. No one dared to move, afraid of touching the crimson lightning strands. Lu Fan, relying on his high mana and endurance attributes, which gave strong resistance to magic attacks, was not too afraid of the lightning. He tried moving a little, and sure enough, the crimson lightning strands around him danced like sprites, avoiding him as though they had no intention of harming him. It seems like within the lightning boundary, friendly units can move freely without being struck by the crimson lightning strands. This made sense. After all, if lightning boundary did not spare allies, when Lu Fan rode Xiao Ye into battle and Bao Bao used his skills while he was still beside them, the enemy would be fine while Lu Fan and Xiao Ye would be trapped. If that happens, would that not make Bao Bao a burden worse than the enemy? After quickly moving around several times and confirming that allies could move freely within the lightning boundary, Lu Fan completely relaxed and looked toward Jian Ying and the others. Seeing them still afraid to move, out of fear they would get attacked, Lu Fan felt playful and pushed Tao Shimen while she was not paying attention. I'm dead! Lu Fan! Why? Yeah. I'm fine. Tao Xiamen had been screaming in fright, thinking she would meet the same fate as the flying bone spirits. When she realized she was unharmed, she was surprised, then immediately became angry, turning to smack Lu Fan. You bastard, you scared me to death. While Lu Fan dodged while mocking her, and the atmosphere became lively again. Seeing the two playing around, without being struck by lightning, the others realized the same thing Lu Fan did. Allies would not get attacked within the lightning boundary, so they could not finally relax. All right, I'll stop messing around. I just pushed you once, okay? Come on, was it really that serious? Lu Fan helplessly said while engaging in a life and death battle with Tao Xiamen. Tao Xiamen naturally had no plans to let this go. She fiercely said, How is it not serious? With so many people here, you specifically chose me to bully. If I don't teach you a lesson, you won't know how formidable I, Tao Xiamen, can be. Just as Lu Fan was considering how to restrain Tao Xiamen, he suddenly caught something in his peripheral vision, moved and quickly warmed. Tao Zi, wait a moment. Something seems off about the surroundings? Looking at the sky, large groups of monsters from the Divine Bone Forest had appeared, rising into the air like migrating birds, all flying in one direction. As they flew, these monsters were intertwining in the air. Looking carefully, one could see that these completely different monsters were now decomposing and recombining, appearing extremely strange. The monsters of the Divine Bone Forest were originally very strange, mostly being undead-type monsters with their bodies mostly composed of white bones. Thus, it was not that strange of a sight for their bodies to be decomposing and recombining in the air to form a larger monster. However, in their nearly 2 days of exploring the Divine Bone Forest, Lu Fan's group had never seen so many monsters flying toward the sky together. Furthermore, undergo some strange transformations while heading in one direction. It was only natural they all felt somewhat uneasy. Under Lu Fan's command, Bao Bao stopped breathing roaring thunder to show off and quietly retreated to join everyone in watching the monsters fly off. Under everyone's gaze, those hundreds of Divine Bone Forest monsters finally combined into a giant bone dragon about the same size as Xiao Ye, eventually disappearing on the horizon.